All right, it's 7 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order here. I will start off with a land acknowledgement. In the spirit of respect, authenticity, and reconciliation, the town of Slave Lake honors and acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional lands of Sawridge First Nation within Treaty 8 territory, home to Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people who have occupied these lands since time immemorial. That being said, Councillor Adams.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That is carried. Next, we have climate change risk and vulnerability assessment, adaptation planning. Kush, are you taking the lead on that?
Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. The purpose of this report is to provide information to Council on the completed high-level assessment of climate change on the town-owned infrastructure and assets. Back in April 2023, town administration applied for a grant available to municipalities for undertaking climate change risk and vulnerability assessment for town-owned assets and infrastructure. The funding of $80,000 was approved by Municipal Climate Change Action Center under planning stream of the Climate Resilience Capacity Building Program. The town of, upon approval of the grant, Town of Slave Lake engaged Associate Engineering in partnership with All One Sky Foundation for this project. The project workshops were initiated early in June 2023. The purpose of this assessment was to conduct a high-level climate-based risk analysis for towns' infrastructure and to summarize highest priority climate risks. The Public Infrastructure Engineering Vulnerability Committee, which is called PIVC, high-level screening process was used to assess the municipal assets and services. The assessment considered direct physical damages or impacts to the assets, and the asset included stormwater, water, wastewater, solid waste, road, fleet, equipment, building, recreation facilities, parks, trails, sports fields, etc. There were also direct services losses considered, such as flooded roadway that is impassable or outdoor facilities being closed because of smoke or heat. And also indirect effects of those direct impacts were also considered, which included impacts to the employees' ability to do the work. The community-wide risk assessment considered all potential climate-related impacts affecting the town, including the natural environment, non-municipal assets and services, the economy, the health, and the well-being of people in the community. The assessment considered direct impacts to public safety, loss of life, morbidity, injury, disease, etc., quality of life, which is in the sense of recreation, lifestyle, evacuations, etc., municipal finances, and local economy. Indirect impacts considered for public safety or other local economy as a result of impacts and damage to the property and infrastructure or interruption of services. Based on the climate model projection data for Slave Lake area, some climate hazards are showing an increasing trend into the future. The largest shifts are for extreme heat, which are days above 30 degrees Celsius. Number of cooling days, frost-free seasons, annual total precipitation. These climate hazards have likelihood scores increasing from 3, which means 3 indicates likely to occur as frequently as current climate, to 5, which indicates likely to occur more frequently than current climate. The climate changes to lightning, hailstorm, wildfire, drought, and high winds, although not specifically quantifiable. The projections are suggesting that more frequent and longer periods will be observed. To complete the study, multiple workshops were held with department heads, staff members from operations, utilities, parks and facilities, community services, and airport, and also Waste Commission, to gather data about existing system and determine risk associated with the systems factoring the climate change parameters. The risk ratings exercise was completed as a group, and the ratings can be found in the attached final report. Once the risks were identified for climate change parameters, the adaptation plan was developed to address the identified risks. Then that information can also be found in the attached report. So now I'll request town has invited Associated Engineering tonight to provide details on the completed study and engage in question and answers with council. So I'll request Associated Engineering to continue their presentation, and I've attached their slideshow to this report so you can follow along. Okay.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me presenting this to you. Juliana Tang with Associated Engineering. I reside up in Edmonton, and I think Kush has provided quite a good summary. I don't know what else I can say. It's actually quite complete. So I understand that you do have slides, so I'll keep this quite simple and in terms and not getting too much into details, because you do have the executive summary and the reports, and those really dive into details. In terms of agenda, we'll talk a little bit of introduction and project overview, and we'll talk a little bit about details about how climate impacts is impacting this community and how we assess the risk. And then on top of that, after we know what the risks are, next is what's next. Well, what are we going to do about the risk? So that talks about the adaptation and planning. So if you go to slide number 3, there's an introduction regarding our team. So I'm the project manager and also the lead for this project. Working with me is a senior risk assessor, is also an engineer as well, Jeff O'Driscoll from Winnipeg, and Jeff Zakuski, who's the director of climate adaptation resilience planner, and he is he's with All One Sky Foundation. So a little bit of acknowledgement, next slide would be, we can't do this without the collaboration and also the knowledge of the people behind me. Kush was really instrumental in helping us organize a lot of these workshops. And so along with the Lesser Slave Lake Regional Waste Management Commission, we do have Randy as well, helping to provide a lot of the information about the infrastructure that also provide the service to this community. And just to let you know, the landfill is one of the best run landfill in Alberta out of 472. So good job, Randy. All righty. Also, the funding is through MCCAC, so we can't do this without the funding. So it was really helpful that it's really awesome that the MCCAC Municipal Climate Change Action Center has provided a lot of these enable a lot of communities to do these assessments. So a little bit of a project overview. Like Kush said, it is to perform a high-level climate risk assessment for the town's infrastructure. And the town's infrastructure that we're looking at is the stormwater, which pertains to drinking water, wastewater, municipal buildings, facilities, the fleets, and roads, fleets meaning the equipment that Kelvin manages and operates, roads, solid waste management, airports, and as well as your parks, trails, and sports field. So these are the major assets that we looked at. So in principle, in terms of the risk management, we do follow the ISO 31000. And in this slide, number 8 there, gives you an overall general process how risk is being managed. So it goes from integration to structuring comprehensive approach to understand what the data is about and customizing it specifically to the community, and having stakeholders involved and providing information to be inclusive so that we know that what we have good information about the community, and having a dynamic and nature so that anything that changes is being reviewed. So it's not stagnant. So this report is just the beginning of the conversations, not the end. So there's dynamic understanding, there's timely, there's changes to the organization, to the way the community is being managed and how it reacts to climate. Best available information, definitely we need the people, boots on the ground, to tell us what information, like expectations and level of service that these assets provide. And of course, it fits into the whole community, human and cultural factors, and understanding there's a continuing improvement. So as you go around the ring, this is the principles of risk management that we follow. In terms of project overview, the next slide, which is slide 9. So anytime when we look at assets and when you think about asset management, it's just what's under the ground, what's above the ground, that's been engineered, and how does it service the community. In this case, with climate change, you do look at it with the lens of extreme climate events. So when it's really hot, extreme heat, extreme wind, high precipitation, how is that going to impact the community? Not only with the municipal asset that we look at, we also look at the community-wise. So in terms of people, how are people going to be reacting to the different changing climates in terms of the health and psychological impacts? And so if you go to slide 10, the climate change risk assessment in general basically is understanding interaction of infrastructure and climate. So we do assess the consequence and likelihood. So the consequence and likelihood, the product of the two gives you risk. So if you look at the image at the bottom that shows the probability of climate, which is the weather event, interacting with the infrastructure component, the Venn diagram in the middle basically is understanding what the risks are. So that's why it's really important to have people who understand these infrastructure very well and see what's the historical issues that we've seen in the past, and using a climate lens, a lens of projecting into future and seeing, okay, how is that going to interact when we have more extreme weather events? Slide number 11 is understanding the risks. There you see a matrix. So this is sort of the matrix. It allows us to quantify risk. So again, through the workshop, we identify the likelihood. So the first image there that shows the flood indicating that, okay, the likelihood could be around 0 to 1, and the consequence would be major if you ever have a flood. But then with the climate, with the impact of climate, so let's say you have extreme rainfall within a certain period of time, it shifts the likelihood because of the more extreme weather events happening, you shifts the flood to a much higher likelihood, which shifts you into a very high risk. So then understanding that risk, how to reduce that risk is adaptation. So you drop it down to, yes, it's going to be highly likely into future, but the consequence is low. And that's what we're aiming for, is to reduce the consequence. So then how does this apply to us? Slide number 13, you'll see the projected climate in Slave Lake. So we looked at 15 different parameters, all the way from days above 30 degrees to shifting ecosystem, which shows the acute climate impact to a more chronic climate impact. And of all, based on the projected model, based on the climate models, we see that a lot of the climate events are getting more and more frequent. For example, days above 30 degrees, there's going to be more of that occurring. 100-year rainfall event, it's going to be more occurring more often. And then drought, you see it occurring more often. There's probably some oxymoron there saying, well, if you're going to have more drought, how come you can have more overland flooding? It's more of the events that's happening. It's not a constant event. So you can have drought happening, but then next month you can have rainfall. So it's very unpredictable. However, there are models out there that can provide these guidance, provide guidance to see the trend in which it's happening with these climates. So then when you project that, when we look at how these, which one of these climate will impact the community the most, slide 14, you see the top 5. With Slave Lake in particular is days above 30 degrees, hottest day. Short duration, intense rainfall causing overland flooding is the second highest climate impact. Wildfire and smoke. Winds, high winds. So high winds, we're talking about gusting wind over 90 to 100 kilometers an hour. And then fifth one, which is river flooding and increased water level due to high precipitation. High extreme precipitation, not consistent precipitation. So you get flash floods. So then how does that impact community-wide? That in particular is that with the in terms, the highest impact in terms of community, you get the loss and a reduced road access because during wintertime, there's more precipitation. Wildfire smoke definitely impact the community quite heavily, as I've seen in the past in the 2013 fire. Yeah, yeah, 10 years, right? 12, 11 years now. Yeah. Health impacts definitely reduced recreation, reduced interruption to air transport, increased space cooling because you need to cool space down, especially quite. It will impact the vulnerable community, such as the children and people with health impacts. Slide number 16 basically kind of gives you a snapshot of all the assets that we look at. So the top 5 that's most impacted first is parks and trails and sports field, mainly because they're so vulnerable and they react to different changes of climates very quickly. And so therefore we see a lot of vulnerability there and impacts there because of climate. Buildings, that in essence is also quite impacted because you got to think about cooling space, heating space, and how it's going to adjust with the climate. Roads, stormwater, solid waste, wastewater, airport water, fleet. So it kind of goes in descending order. As you can see, even though we're not giving a lot of emphasis, let's say, on the water treatment plant or the fleet, but there are some risk in there that needs to be reviewed as well. Slide number 17 is just a sample from the report. And basically this is the workshop that we put together. And right away, what I want you to see is when we go through the assessment for this in particular is buildings for the multi-rec center facility. You right away, you see the red hot spot and the yellow spot. So the yellows basically tells you these are mid-range risk and the hot spot is the. So when we zoom into the report, I don't expect you to read that, be able to read that, but for all the facilities, you'll see a matrix like that. So slide number 18 basically is saying, okay, now we know the risk, what are we going to do about it? So there's series of adaptation planning that we can do, and we discussed this with all the leads in terms of who are operating and managing the infrastructure. Business as usual is always on the table, because if you already have a system that's robust, continue operate as it is. However, if there's some systems that you think that we need more information, that's where we start to conduct increased monitoring and assessment so that we get the information to be able to inform future replacements, future repairs, or even build new. So then sometimes you don't have to do anything physically. You just we have to review the policy plan. So in terms of plans, standards, guidelines, or bylaws, even with people working out in the field, how are they going to be impacted by the climate, especially heat or heavy winds and so on and so forth. Building new, is there any new infrastructure that we need to build in order to be more robust and withstand the impacts of climate? And then increase awareness maybe is just an increased awareness and education to the public and understanding what is it that we're doing, why we're doing this. And also emergency management, specifically with the like your ambulance and your fire emergency services. Are they going to be impeded? And if it is, how are they going to be impeded? And is there any changes that need to be made? And also human resourcing. There's a lot of work that needs to be assessed, and maybe human resourcing is limited, and that needs to be considered for future adaptation planning. So these are discussed throughout, and in slide 19, you see a sample of the report. So for each of the asset that we look at, we look at all the previous slide that you saw, the adaptation planning. So do we need to conduct research? Meaning, do we need to collect more information? And in this case, we're talking about drought on the sports field. So what kind of information do we need? For example, do we need to assess different types of irrigation system or planting vegetation that is drought tolerant and so on and so forth. So as you can see, for each of the adaptation, we come up with potential time frame in which you can implement and recommended actions. Slide number 20 is just another sample as well. This one is particular to water infrastructure and treatment. And you'll see that for all the assets in the report. So last slide basically is recommended next step. Like I said, in terms of risk management, this is a start of conversations, not the end. So in terms of prioritization action, that's usually one of the first step that we advise to understand what the critical infrastructure and which one has the highest impact. So those can be addressed. And needs to be cross-cutting. We recognize that there's a lot of departments moving in different rates, and therefore needs to have these shared information and pooling resources so that it can be communicated, and also provide education to the public. And continue to monitor and assess so that your risk score is always updated. So when some improvement has been done, maybe the risk has dropped down, and then you have the adaptation actions being taken. So you've done, there's a due diligence there where you can reduce the score or even reduce the risk down to zero. And lastly, continual review of the climate data and update the plans, and therefore staying flexible enough to adapt to the changing climate. That is all from my presentation.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions for Councillor Adams?
Okay, I'm trying to understand the risk assessment piece and where that comes into play to prioritize, say, parks over top of road infrastructure and whatnot. Why would parks be ranked higher?
So in that particular exercise, it turns out that parks ranked high is mainly because there's more assets in there. There's more assets in terms of number of assets. So there's a lot of fields, and they're very vulnerable. And anytime when you see a vulnerability, it always scores high. So in terms of risk, is most risky, but in terms of level of service, which I think you're more concerned about, roads provide you better with level of service, more critical infrastructure. Therefore, when we talk about prioritizing, instead of having parks being instead of addressing something that has a high risk score, we need to address something that has the highest level of service to you because they're critical. So if road has road, even though it's not ranking in terms of risk to address, but ranking in terms of risk it will see. So if you see it that way, that means roads has a lower risk than parks, but doesn't mean that you plan to put all your money in parks. You definitely have to realize that, yeah, roads is a higher level of service, a more critical infrastructure than parks. Stormwater is a more critical infrastructure than parks. Water is a more critical infrastructure than parks. So it might turn the other way, because if you rank your critical infrastructure higher, then parks will be at the end. This score is just scoring the risk impacts.
That answered a couple of my questions.
Any other questions for Juliana?
Yes.
In the meantime, while Councillor Adams is picking his next questions here, what's the resource impacts to the municipality? Staff time, cost? Do you have any just very high level estimations, or are we too early in the process to determine that?
I think with our scope of work, we don't look at resource in terms of hours how would be impacted. I think we have to understand that some of these risk scores being a little low, for example, like roads, stormwater, they have less risk, is that the system is quite robust. There are some risks to it. So whether or not we can estimate additional resources, I don't know if I'm answering your question, is a little tough because sometimes department change. But I think you're asking about the cost.
Well, I guess the cost to implement some of these items.
Oh, okay.
Is it big comprehensive process? Is it pretty easy just to pick away at it to undertake with our existing resources? Just that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. If you look at our report does talk about adaptation plan. A lot of it actually is looking at the current business as usual, actually, because a lot of these infrastructure are quite robust, and it's just about tweaking a little bit. And sometimes it's putting in tweaking your policies and plans. in our adaptation planning, none of them was talking about building new because it's already in the books to upgrade certain infrastructure. It's already in the plan. So there's nothing extra added to it. So it wasn't a lot. If you go into the adaptation planning section and really highlight some of the efforts that's needed, and you'll see it's not, well, I shouldn't say it's not a lot because we didn't do the economic analysis on that part.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
I guess my other question was more directed over to Jeff and town. Was when are we, because some of the comments in that report had to do with implementing conservation orders, both for water and energy. When do we do that, or what does that look like in our current? And do we need to adapt that, or is that part of?
So we're actually undergoing a bit of an exercise right now as to starting to develop some of those plans, and especially as it relates to water. As you know, drought or dry conditions this summer has occupied a lot of discussion, especially in southern Alberta, right? More so than anything not. So under Cal's department there, Cody Kelly's actually in the process of working with Alberta Environment and coming up with some plans for the town as it relates to, you know, some potential initiatives or actions that maybe are taken should we start to experience some of that, or, you know, what those levels may be. So we're actually in the process already of recognizing that, not that we necessarily have concern for this year as it relates to those items that some of our southern neighbors are experiencing, but that we haven't maybe had a robust plan in place as to that we can execute, or what, you know, what levels require us to do this and this, right, as it relates to water conservation, or as it relates to you know, preparations for low water sort of times. So those things are coming. They're actively that process is engaged, has been probably for the last month. I believe Kush and Calvin are both involved in that process as well. And something will be coming back to council likely before this summer here, just for review and further sort of input. So it's coming.
Okay, and if I can keep going.
Go ahead, Councillor Adams.
So like my other one was trying to understand where we are in the report, because rank number 2 was overland flooding you had in there as a risk. I believe that was slide 14.
14, yep.
Okay, oh, I did remember. How does that, where, I guess maybe again, Jeff or Calvin might be able to identify the locations of that, like where are we risking overland flooding? I'm trying to remember in the last long time of ever having an overland flood issue after 88 that didn't include the Fournier piece, which is our fault, or the northeast corner, which has to do with our own stormwater.
So, 88, they channel up there a lot deeper, a lot further. We've actually pretty good since that. We do have some just over that flooding. One area is over by the hospital. That's the low area of all our storm vaults.
Always, yeah, it's done that since I can remember.
Yeah. We've also installed the duck bills in the gates that should help that a lot. Big pumps,
But for this to rank as the second, like on the page there, to be that big a deal that we have to worry about overland flooding, I'm trying to think where are we talking about this risk has such a large impact for our community.
I think a lot of it, if you remind me, Kush and Calvin, is that also with the trails, there was and trails that's along the river.
Yep.
There's some washouts and stuff. So when we were going through the ranking, a lot of the discussion that ranked quite high.
So
Now,
the washout counts as an overland flood.
yeah. Sorry, say that
Okay.
again?
So like high river levels that washes out the bankment is called overland
Well,
flooding.
yeah, overland flooding could be just precipitation and overland flow of sheet flow through from the roads over to parks. River flooding was just river flooding, that your water level's coming up and it's overtopping the banks. And it could be a river flowing fast and eroding the trails and eroding the riverbanks.
Basically what it is, yeah.
Yeah, so what happens when we see that this impacts across the infrastructure it's a high concern. Now, is it gonna happen? It all depends. But we highlighted the fact that it is a high concern that river flooding, if ever occurs, or overland flooding will have high impacts.
Okay, and you asked my other question. I'm good.
Counselor Hughes, go ahead.
Not a question for you per se, but just for Jeff or just a general wondering. Have we thought about sharing this report with our neighbors at the MD as well? Just because, you know, it could be very prudent in terms of future planning or possible collaborations that we may need to share this data with them. Just,
Yeah, there's nothing preventing it from happening.
okay. Yeah, thank you.
And part of this discussion, that's why we have participation from MD as well.
Yeah.
Because it services the town, yeah.
Counselor Adams.
One more. Again, for Jeff, I guess more so than anything, we, one of the recommendations in here was the adoption of the CIP program, which we had already shot down not that long ago, or are we going to be looking at that again, or is this kind of a moot point on there?
Yeah, that is, you're correct. So that was a program that we had on our books for a couple of years there. It had zero uptake. I mean, there's always a potential to re-explore that program.
It wasn't a question of uptake. It was a question of we didn't move forward and offer it.
Yeah, and we have qualified for it. The problem, there's some inherent problems with it in the sense that there's some financial aspects to it that maybe don't make it as much of an incentive for someone, you know, to participate in that they may. And there's some liability or financial liability from the municipality also to support this program, right? So there has to be an appetite for that cost to be incurred by the municipality, if you will, right? So I mean, it's included in here. It's closely tied to MCCAC. It's one of their, I can't remember if it actually falls underneath them or not, but it's closely tied in the same sort of realm of climate change and adaptation. But it definitely could be something, if council so chooses to, that we can revisit or add to the list, but it is not currently available to us right now. Or we're not currently participating in it right now.
Okay, all right. Is there any other questions for Juliana? If not, I would entertain a motion. Counselor Hughes.
Yeah, I move that council accepts this presented report as information.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That is carried.
Thank you.
Juliana. Thank you, Fish. Thank you, everybody
Thank
involved.
you.
Up next, we have the Town of Slave Lake revised policies, Mr. Simpson.
Let's pull it up here. All right, so similar to other reports have been brought to this council. The purpose of this one is to review and approve revised Town of Slave Lake policies. Currently, our senior leadership team is reviewing Town of Slave Lake policies from each department. The review is to update policies to our current policy templates and to ensure policy information is current to respective department processes. Town of Slave Lake policies not only are categorized by department, but they are categorized as council or administrative policies. Council policies must be approved by council, while administrative policies are approved internally by the CAO. We are presenting council policies that have been reviewed by our senior leadership team and are ready for council approval. The list below states the policies that have been revised and states the changes of the content that have been made. We've also attached a copy of the original policies for reference, so you can see what you're looking for. 3 policies that are brought for you tonight. First being in regards to lot grading, which was just a template update. Subdivision signs and fences, which was also a template update. There was an update on ownership, responsibility of sign and or fence maintenance and replacement. And an updated policy as it relates to offsite levies. So there was a template update and offsite levy study definition added to that policy. 3 options before council tonight are 1, to accept the updated policies provided in this report, 2, provide amendments for administration to consider, and 3, maintain the current policies.
Okay, so we have the policies in front of us. Is there any questions for Mr. Simpson? Counselor Adams, do you have any questions?
I have no question. Actually, I got one question. But it's on the motion. Are we allowed to accept all 3 in one motion?
You know, you can make 3 individual motions if you like. I think that's fine.
I do have some comments, so, in regards to the offsite levy bylaw, so I will scroll over there, bear with me. Okay, so I think we need, my personal thoughts here is I think we need a little more clarity on section 3.13. That speaks to redeveloped land, and 4.2.2, which speaks to not imposing an offsite levy, whether an offsite levy has ever been collected. So for example, let's pretend I own an old single family dwelling, which I have never paid an offsite levy for. I decide to mow my dwelling down and construct a 30-unit apartment building. And the way I currently read this policy is that I'm exempt from offsite levies because there was an existing development there. That's despite my use and intensity drastically changing. Or consider parts of Cornerstone, for example. There was originally a golf course there years ago. There was actually a residence on one side of the field years ago. So it could potentially be argued that a development was there as well, potentially exempting them from offsite levies if this policy had existed at that time. So if I recall correctly, the spirit and the intent of that portion of the policy coming in is that Council of the Day brought this in shortly after the fire so that individuals reconstructing homes would not be burdened with an offsite levy. The spirit of the intent of it was something was to be for something similar in use and intensity. Sorry. So personally, I'm along that thought process too. I would like to see a little more clarity on the criteria for not imposing an offsite levy and possibly restricting it to developments that are similar in use and intensity. So I am curious to what the rest of council thinks of that. Councillor Adams.
You bring up a very good point. I wish I picked up on that one. That's good. The intent there, from what I remember, was exactly that when after the fire, the building and whatnot was to, just because your house that was built in 1968 burned down doesn't mean you should have to pay offsite levies now that you had a new one. You do bring up a good point on the change of intensity, especially if you're moving, like you say, some of those units, you could fit a 4-plex or an 8-plex on some of those pieces of land that used to be single dwellings. And not to mention the different tie-ins that are now required as opposed to before when they were just a single. I would be in favor of trying to get that worded and to clean that up. I don't want that to be a loophole that we're missing. I think we need to do something to honor the spirit of this beyond the letter of the law, I guess, of the bylaw.
Any other discussion or thoughts from the rest of council or our CAO?
No, can I just get those two sections you're referring to again there? Sorry, Bryce.
So section 3. Let me go through my notes here. 3.13 speaks to redeveloped land, and 4.2.2 speaks to not imposing the offsite levy and whether an offsite levy has ever been collected.
Thank you.
So is that something that administration would be able to bring back some clarity? Does administration getting
Yeah,
is it clear what we're getting at?
absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely bring that back.
Okay. So I will make a motion that administration brings back some definitions for what a redevelopment would constitute.
Yeah, you can just make a motion to bring back changes as, or potential clarification as discussed. That's fine.
Sure, that'll be my motion.
For the offsite levy policy.
Okay, I make that motion there. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? Okay, that is carried. And then I did actually have one other question. This is probably for our CAO, and I don't know if this is a better question for Lori or not. So this might speak to the bylaw more than the policy. But what other options exist for calculating how the offsite levy is calculated? So if I recall correctly, it's calculated by lot size. It's not calculated by intensity of use. So I could hypothetically put a single family dwelling on an acre lot or put a 4-plex or an 8-plex, yet they would pay the exact same amounts in offsite levies, despite one having a substantially higher intensity of use and putting more strain on the system. So I'd be curious to know if any other options exist for how offsite levies are charged. I'm not saying I want to change. I'm just wondering if there's other communities that do it different ways.
I don't know if I have the answer for you on that. I mean, the standard definitely is based on size. Some may be parcel size, some may be frontage size. There may be different calculations as to how that size or that fraction of size comes to play. Yeah, like area, yeah. I think the vast majority, I don't know if there's another, I wouldn't want to say definitively that there is no other option. But it's definitely the process that we've employed historically
Yes,
here.
absolutely.
And so I would, potential changes to that might cause a number of different issues, moving forward, but I can definitely find that out for you or or get some more information as to what other
I'm
municipalities are, but
I'm curious. It doesn't need to be a big endeavor by administration where it's a big report that takes hours and hours.
Yeah.
I'm more curious on it than anything
I'm,
else.
I will say that, let's say maybe not necessarily in a residential sort of setting, but let's say a larger commercial sort of environment where you have a large parcel of land and maybe a smaller development happening on that, right? There are options, there are mechanisms in place that if a development is taking place in a smaller portion of that lot, through the use of subdivision, would limit or reduce or have the offsite levies more relative to the size of the development, right? So, I mean, we see that more often in industrial and commercial sort of applications, not necessarily residential. It wouldn't be, you could potentially see it in a residential, maybe in an acreage sort of style setting, but you essentially would have, I mean, even with subdivision requires different, the problem with subdivision is it requires unique access to utilities as well. So each parcel within that needs to have, it's potentially its own water hookup and its own potential sewer hookup and utilities or whatever the case. So you might forego some offsite levies for a portion of that property if no development takes place on there. Like you couldn't put a garage or anything. You couldn't, anything that would typically require a permit would trigger an offsite levy. But I can, I will get back to council and report on that. I'm not aware of other models, but I'm not 100% definitive that there isn't one that exists. So.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or questions for Mr. Simpson here?
No.
If not, I would entertain a motion for the lot grading and subdivision signs and fences. Councillor Moellen.
I'll make a motion to accept the lot grading, subdivision signs and fences and offsite levy policies as presented.
I don't think I make a friendly amendment. The offsite levies coming back, so probably scratch the offsite levies from that.
Sorry. So I'll move to accept the lot grading and subdivision signs and fences policies as presented.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That is carried, and I will call a 5-minute recess here. The meeting back to order here. Next up is our construction season project service levels, and that is our project manager, Kush, taking the lead on that. Kush, the floor is yours.
Good evening again. The purpose of this report is to have service level review with council related to construction season. As a part of a yearly review and discussion, town administration would like to share information with council on what are the typical process involved before starting of any site work, where to expect work zone this summer, road closures, etc. Typical construction project kicks off after May long weekend and runs until end of October as weather permits. Before starting any site work, most of the project goes through following steps or processes depending on the complexity of the project. So the first thing is there is a construction kickoff meeting. So a kickoff meeting is held with contractors to go over project scope, limits of construction zone, hours of constructions, communication plans for affected residents, and also making sure that if additional support is needed for the residents with respect to coordinating garbage pickups during collection days, assisting with temporary ramps to the property, or affecting driveway use while construction is going on, etc. And also we make sure that contractor creates temporary safe walking zone for pedestrians where construction is happening. And also during that time, administration also makes emphasis to contractor to hire local contractors or source local materials as much as possible, and especially to those where contractors are coming from Edmonton or out of town. Then health and safety orientation is scheduled to make sure the safe work environment is maintained on site for the workers and the people around the work zone. Then there is also review of traffic accommodation strategy plan, showing how traffic will be managed while passing through active work zone. Also, there is sometimes environmental construction operation plan review, which shows how protection measures will be taken by the contractor while working close to river bodies or parks, and in general to protect the environment. Then there is usually review of road closure plans. So based on our process, road closure permit is required like a minimum of 48 hours prior to closing a section of a road for any construction work. Once the permit is approved, notification is shared with emergency services and school division, operation departments of the school division for bus routes or affecting the bus routes. Then there is also review of shop drawing. Shop drawing review is done to confirm proposed material matches the project specifications or not. There is also review to truck route and disposal site to make sure that they are utilizing proper truck routes as per our bylaw for hauling in equipment or hauling in material in and out of the work zones. There's also active communications that is released throughout the course of a project on social media, website, or through Voyant alerts, notifying residents of active construction work zones, temporary speed zone changes, traffic route or pedestrian route changes, road closures, etc. There is also active communication channels that are held with affected lot owners next to the work zone to make sure that they are aware on day-to-day activities. And usually this is done by contractor through door-to-door knocking or through distributing pamphlets, which are created and distributed by contractor, but reviewed by the town first. Then while the project is going on, there's usually timely inspections, right? And then progress meetings to make sure project is progressing as planned. And also sometimes those meetings are crucial to resolve any construction issues as it arise. So that talks about the process that's typically involved before any site work or during the site works going on. Now the next section talks about what are the expected work zone during this upcoming construction season. So based on the projects that were approved, you could see a work zone on 5th Street Northeast between 3rd Ave Northeast and 4th Ave Northeast for road rehab. There will be a downtown core between 2nd Ave Northeast, 3rd Ave Northeast for revitalization, section of 2nd Street Northeast for road overlay, various sections of town during our annual sidewalk and asphalt rehabilitation work. Then 8th Street Northwest for water line replacement, 9th Street Southeast for water line replacement. And then a section of a period where Hilda Ibn Park will see construction of walking trails this summer, and also a section of Shooter Park walking trail for improving trail lighting, like installing some more lights. Any notification related to construction work zones will be released on town website, social media, through warrant alerts, as always. And then, yeah, so our recommendation is to accept this report as presented.
Alrighty, is there, Councillor Moel?
I'm just going through that list of projects. Which projects are we doing ourselves and which ones are gonna be contracted out?
So usually the projects, it all depends on like the complexity of the project. So like water line replacement would it includes like 400 meter of replacement. So we don't have capacity to do it ourselves, right? So pretty much majority of the project you see here will be sourced out.
Okay.
However, there might be support from our operations department for some of the tasks that that might be required while the project is going on. For example, if we have to do something with respect, if they need do some little bit of trenching or something while we are installing trail lightings along Shooter Park, then yeah, we can get help of operations department to come and help us out, right? Usually it's on case by case basis, and also we have to determine if resources are available at that time, or if they are occupied, then yeah, like we don't have another option other to go to the contractors.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Adams?
Just a quick question to understand a little better. When you're saying paving, for example, Fifth Street.
Yeah.
You're saying between Third Avenue and Fourth Avenue. Now, does that include the intersection at Fourth Ave or the intersection at Third, or is it like just line to line?
No, usually it would be, we will look at the condition of that intersection. If
Mhm.
the intersection requires some touch-ups, then your boundaries are adjusted accordingly, right? So if you have to go further out and include that intersection, then yeah, it will be done accordingly.
Any other questions for our project manager here?
One more actually. Are we, could we be moving up dates because of the weather we're having if it holds? Would our construction season start earlier, or are we stuck to a?
No, it's based on weather permitting. So if weather permits us to start early, then yeah, we will make sure that we start early if
Okay.
contractors are available to start early. So currently, right now, we are trying to advertise a lot of projects for tendering and stuff. Today, we uploaded one of the water line replacement project. This week, I'll be uploading like sidewalk rehab, asphalt patching. The next week, we will have, so pretty much March and the first few weeks of April will be advertising those stuff and closing those projects and bringing the reports back to council, get the contract stuff all out of the way. And then it's just a matter of, as soon as weather permits, just get contractor out and start the work as soon as possible.
Excellent.
Councillor Moellem, then Councillor Choba.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask if there was still any projects left to do on the north part of the downtown revitalization on north of Third Avenue, you know, the service or the ATB side.
Yes, so we still have to install that art piece, so which is in the works. So as soon as weather permits, like we have finalized the design and we have finalized like the contractor who's going to install it. So it's just a matter of, as soon as weather permits, once frost is out of the ground, just go and start the work.
Councillor Choba.
Thank you. I've heard you say as soon as weather permits a couple of times. So how would we ensure that we're staying within budget? Because one of the things that we notice is when things like weather and the rest comes into play, we start to overstretch budgets, right? So how are you going to stay within that budget, and what are some of the plans that you have? Right?
So usually, like, our contract documents are worded in a way that, you know, like if there is rain days or whatever, then contractor is supposed to, and also it's a good practice when a contractor is coming out, they have to anticipate, yeah, if they're coming out in June or, end of June, they have to anticipate, yeah, it's a wet period here, right? And usually during our construction kickoff meetings and stuff, we will give them those indications as to, what is the best time for Slave Lake area, right? And like what is the time to consider worst case scenarios, right? So based on that, their schedule will also include some of the float days, like if they lose like 5 or 6 days to rain or whatever, usually those are not concerns. And then those progress meetings are utilized to go through those conversations, right? If it's kind of like if the weather impact has delayed them for over a long period of time, then it's a different conversation, right? But usually it's on a case by case basis. And then, yeah, but we try to minimize those impacts as much as possible through utilizing those progress meetings and having an honest discussion with the contractor.
Oh, and I'll add, a lot of those costs are borne, a lot of those risk is built into the contract, right? So it's more of a delivery period, delivery date, or an end product delivered by a certain date with some flexibility built into that sort of schedule. So a lot of that risk sits with the contractor. But we also build in contingency financing or contingency plans as a factor of percentage of that total capital project into these capital projects that come forward, right? So, although you may have a project that's, let's just say it's budgeted for $1 million, there might be a 10% or 15% contingency based on the nature of that work or what we're looking at. That contingency may be different, but we build that into that project. So, that in reality, that might mean that the $1 million project, if nothing else goes wrong, maybe it's an $850,000 sort of project, and we've just built 150 in for those emergency sort of purposes. So, although cost overruns do happen sometimes, I would say that we're fairly confident that we've actually been fairly good at our capital project and our budgeting process to ensure that we've got enough contingency in there to cover the unplanned events. And for the vast majority, we're usually under budget.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Choba.
What criteria are we using to select contractors, especially in terms of the experience with similar projects? And is it possible for contractors to source materials locally and or manpower locally to support some of these projects? Do you know?
Yes. So they can definitely reach out to local suppliers for materials or whatever. Let's say paving contractor is coming out of town, but likely they will get Ruel Concrete or Carwall to supply gravel or supply paving mix, right? So that's definitely up to them to source. And usually, during our kickoff season, we do put emphasis on them to use wherever they can, right? We cannot tell them, hey, you just have to use that, right? We cannot do that, but we do put emphasis that try to use it wherever you can, right? With respect to your question, with respect to your selection criteria for experience and stuff. So we do have, whenever the document goes out for bid, then we usually have selection criteria listed down, which does, look at experience of the company. How is the company set up overall? What are the key personnel involved in the project and the cost of the project. So there are several factors that we built in to make sure that the bid or the proposal you get is qualitative, not just focusing on just price, right?
And those factors are, and you'll start to see them as we start to bring those tenders back to council for approval are weighted, right? So there's a different weighting or a score that's applied to each of those categories. And, there might be different ones. I mean, this process also applies for capital purchases, right? So we're buying a grader. It will have a list of different specifications and a weighting, and price would be one of those factors, but functionality and capability and all the different aspects of a capital purchase that that we look for to make sure that we're making the right choice, and the most cost effective or appropriate choice for the municipality. So it's a pretty robust system.
Last question.
Go ahead, Councillor Choba.
Sorry.
No, or yours.
I think it's more directed to the CAO. Do we have any plans for evaluating the effectiveness and like community satisfaction with any of the projects that we're doing? Like, is that something that we've thought about? Just a no?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any formal mechanism, in terms of, do people like the road that was rebuilt, or do they like the downtown concrete that was poured? I think and you probably would access it more than we would, is you probably will hear that from your residents. You would hear that from those impacted residents or those businesses or the community members, likely informally or casually as to, whether that project was supported or not. And sometimes it's negative feedback, or sometimes it's positive feedback. Some might agree with that expenditure, and some may not think that should have been a priority at all. So it's kind of a tough, it's a tough one to put out there in terms of, hey, do you
Right.
do you like how we put the sewer in this week? Has it impacted your your services? So I mean, some of those, sometimes some of the things that we do are as a municipality, or the service that we're providing, is difficult to gauge support. It's not impossible. I mean, and it's something, if you feel that there's a project that you're curious on to what the feedback is from the community, we could probably develop something for that state, but some of the services that we provide might be difficult to gauge that response.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Just to make a quick comment to that, I know one of the ones that I feel were one of the more important projects we took on last year definitely was not a sexy project, was our water line that we took across the river, and we put the two
Yes.
access points to the southeast. The southeast was running on one supply. If that goes, the whole southeast is out. So it's a very critical piece of infrastructure, but and a significant cost. And yet it's not exactly something anybody would care. Or I think the biggest problem with it was the impact it had on the access to Schurter Park.
Yes.
Like, I think some of our more visual projects, like, like the splash
Downtown.
park, let's say at Hilly Haven, or, some of those more accessible, more usable, maybe more, I don't know, positive, more public facing sort of services, right? You tend to hear much more feedback as to, hey, this was a great idea, it's a great park, or maybe the maintenance of our ball diamonds, or the condition and and the effort and the resources that we put into some of those services, right? But yeah, I think Councillor Adams is correct, as some of the other services that we provide may not necessarily receive that sort of same feedback or same interest.
Councillor Adams.
Make a motion to accept his information.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That is carried. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Judge. Mr. Simpson, CAO update.
Perfect. So similar to other community goals, you have before you the CO update in regards to different department activities. So again, I won't go through everything. I'll just highlight some of the ones I think might be of interest to you and to our viewers at home. So under our corporate services umbrella, under communications, our Facebook page reach has increased to 46,600 over this last reporting period, so up 122%. Instagram's also high, and same with our website visits, so all increasing attendance or visitation to those platforms. Some of the top pages of interest of note, or where are they looking at when they come to our website? Our homepage, our Northern Lights Aquatic Center, and our rural renewal stream seem to be getting a lot of the interest from our website. So just a little bit of analytics there. Under our key projects under the communication umbrella, again, the permanent homeless shelter engagement. So there was a large communication aspect to that and continues on. So the communications department was heavily involved in the planning for the 2 in-person open house engagement sessions that took place, as well as all of the active social media activities that are attempting to engage more, to utilize some of our other tools relating to that project. So they're heavily involved in that. They're also involved in redesigning our website, so that's ongoing. They've one of the other projects is the budget 2024 information page, providing residents more information through our engageslavellake.ca platform. And the other one that I would bring to everyone's attention is our land use, excuse me, our land use bylaw municipal development plan engagement has kicked off. So again, off of our engageslavellake.ca website, you'll find some information in regards to the program or to the project, sorry. In addition, there's a link now to a survey so we're soliciting public input under that project as well. So we're encouraging the public to participate in that as well. Under our economic development branch, our rural renewal stream update. So 37 employees are participating. So we added a couple more over the last month. Town of High Prairie Council accepted our offer for us to administer the program on their behalf. We've also received some interest from the MD of Northern Sunrise County. And so we're in the process of providing them some information to see if there's a further partnership to happen for them as well. We received some notification on our housing accelerator fund. So that was there's been some recent media about that in Alberta here. Some of our local neighbors, Westlock, I think being one of them, Jasper, maybe Banff, there was in receipt of some federal funding. Unfortunately, we did not receive or were not successful in that application. It has been mentioned a few times, I think, in council, so I just wanted to kind of close the loop on that.
Jeff, just to interject there, do you know if there's going to be a second round for that?
I don't know.
No. No, right. Thank you.
Sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, business visitation program. So our communication department, our economic development department has completed revisions to the Slave Lake experience map. We've actually already received requests from Slave Lake Minor Hockey for some of these printed maps we distributed to participants for the upcoming provincial championship in March here. And it will be available at least digitally to any other organizations that may wish to choose to print or prepare, insert or hand out or whatever the case may be. I think in this case, we printed them for them, but I think in future cases, to not turn ourselves into a printing factory for all these other organizations, we will provide the digital copy and allow them to distribute it to their groups as they see fit. Last but not least, community workforce development program. So the town of Slave Lake is registered as an official employer to participate in this program. This is also a partnership or through Community Futures, I believe. This was part of that program. And so we have some staff members who are participating in that program and receiving funding to offset training costs. Under our Human Resources Department, recruitment. So we're we're interviewing for shelter worker to fill one full-time spot. So we're at offer stage for a couple casuals. So there's always work that's being done in that department and a number of others. We still have lifeguard positions, casual pound keepers at an offer stage. I believe we're still looking for MRC and parks operator. And we are just about to begin our interview stage for our municipal intern program and grant that we received from Municipal Affairs. Under our IT department, I won't bore you with some of the projects that are taking place in there. One that's kind of interesting and it kind of feeds into Councillor Hughes' question last council meeting in regards to preparations for fire season, is our IT department is actually prepping, in that event that we ever needed to relocate or to go somewhere or operate for our own community, operate a reception center or whatever else is the case. We're now building capacity into our own IT infrastructure to allow us to achieve that. So a set of dedicated IT equipment that's essentially boxed and ready to go. We've added a capability to be able to access internet through Starlink, so a mobile platform. So we essentially would be able to potentially operate or open up a location and have instant connectivity and computers for staff, which we've never had before, right? So we're building capacity in a number of different avenues as it relates to our own emergency preparations for our own municipality. Cybersecurity. So we continue to enhance some of our cybersecurity awareness through, we've got a number of sort of internal I would say training and training opportunities for not only our staff, but our council has probably participated in some of these. Basically, any of our users that have access to our IT systems. So that continues on with training for those that maybe click on something that they're not supposed to, and now as such have to take a course to help educate them a little bit. So it's definitely very much a threat to not only public organizations, but private as well. And so we take that very seriously within our own municipality. And so we're enhancing some of that ability and capability as we go. Under our homeless shelter program, our registration registered 108 identified homeless individuals, enrolled 45 females, 63 males. We're still averaging roughly 14 clients a day. Recorded 575 night and 434 day sleep intakes in February. There was a typo in your report there. That should have been February. Served approximately 366 breakfasts, 422 lunches, and 456 suppers in February. Under the programming umbrella, we're operating a shuttle bus service for residents and for appointments. So we're trying to ensure that they're making their connections with other services, with the overall goal of helping them progress down the line of recovery or down the line of securing full-time housing or the other issues that they may be dealing with. There's a consistent focus on recovery and housing and, housing transition programs. So that's where we're trying to get them, not having the shelter as that long-term solution, but rather the short-term emergency solution or the first step in moving themselves down that line, and maintaining referral connections to various provincial resources. Under our finance department, finance is working on year end. Auditors will be on site March 27th, 28th. Assessment notices will be sent out shortly, and the 2024 mill rate bylaw will be coming to council. Should be next week. Utilities department under operations, so they're cleaning of the carbon room at the plant, water treatment plant, project electrical and plumbing preparation, and the Sawridge lift pump rebuilds are taking place currently. Public Works did do a little bit of plowing. Hasn't been definitely very much snow activity over this winter. They've been grading gravel areas, sanding as required. So some of that maintenance, and then prepping for, you may have seen them out recently, steaming culverts and steaming catch basins and trying to facilitate our early spring and that runoff from, accessing our sewer system. Kush has already outlined projects enough, so I don't think I need to necessarily highlight any of those. Yeah, we'll continue on planning development. So Third Space Planning is working on regulations for the short-term rental project based on our goal setting session. There'll be further consultation once that first draft is completed. They're working on a new policy for vending carts, sidewalk cafes, parking patios or parking lot patios and to fulfill a task coming out of the downtown and Main Street area plan. So that will be coming to council hopefully here before spring. Fire department calls for service to date for 2024 is 108 as of March 6th. So that's up from 96 in 23 and 90 in 2022. So we continue to see a steady increase in those calls for service to our fire department. In February 2024, training for medical training for rural stations and hazardous material training for Station 1 was completed. 4 inspections were completed in the month of February. The search and rescue disaster response course was held at Lesser Slaves was held for Lesser Slave search and rescue members. And we continue to work on some of our capital projects underneath the fire program. Under community services, aquatics, just a couple of highlights. St. Patrick's Day swim is scheduled for March 17th. The National Lifeguard course is being held in April. Facilities and parks manage multiple sewer issues at the MRC. They're preparing for upcoming provincial and Treaty 8 hockey tournaments. They'll be winding down minor hockey bookings and getting some deep cleaning done at MRC. And their continued rebuilding of the multipurpose room and dressing rooms from the flood should be completed this week, I believe. Under Family and Courts or FCSS, volunteer income tax program is underway. There's a youth event planned for March 16th at the Fix, so baking, decorating, and a pizza bun and soda event. Under recreation and programming, Frost Fest was well received within the community. 650 people approximately attended the family carnival. 400 people attended the family frolic in the park. Spring Break Camp is open for registration. It will be operating Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They are planning a paint and skate on April 5th, where families can skate and paint on the ice prior to the ice being removed. There'll be a spring program guide is currently being drafted. If any nonprofits would like to be included, they need to contact Community Services or FCSS within the town office. That's my report. Any questions you may have?
All right, we will begin with Councillor Llewellyn first.
I'm just looking at the events. I see on March 22nd to 24th. We've got two giant things happening both in the MRC. We got the U13 provincials where we're gonna have 8 teams from across Alberta coming here to play to use the rinks. And then we've also got a Taekwondo tournament in the field house as well that I hear is going to be you know, upwards of probably at least 100 people, and then whoever else they bring. Are we looking at, you know, potentially having more employees or even more security
Yeah.
over that weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. So these, like when large events like this take place, our community services department typically will increase not only our cleaning staff, but some of our like obviously our ice maintenance staff and some of our front desk staff, right, to assist for that. So those are typically built into those programs, as well as even our Treaty 8 tournament that's coming. Not so much in the line of security, because we don't really have any security resources as a town or as a, you know, I mean, we contract out any sort of security that we potentially do. I don't know that in this case that we would have added any extra security for that perspective, but yeah, there should be, you should see some more staff. You're not going to see 30 staff there necessarily for that event, but you will see some additional staff for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Choba.
So around the shelter, I know that there's been quite a few successes noted because some of the clients I've interacted with on a professional level because of my my 9-to-5 job, but I don't see. I think my question is, do we celebrate some of those successes by like sharing that information out? Like, is there a way that we're planning to do that? Just because I think the public is a bit disconnected from that. How can we get the public to see that some of the programming that we're providing in that shelter is actually meeting the needs?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one. It's a balance between, I mean, obviously there, you know, on one side, there might be some privacy concerns, right? As it relates to, you know, a person's individual privacy. And so obviously we wouldn't be able to necessarily speak in specifics.
No.
But I mean, there definitely are those successes. And, you know, and the question is, how do you measure that success? Well, sometimes it's just as little as, you know, helping remove some of the barriers, right? You know, a lot of people might not recognize how important your identification is, right? And how important that is to be able to register and access services. If you don't have identification, meaning a driver's license or something, it's very difficult. And so then the question is, well, you just go to the registry and get a new driver's license. Well, you require, that's not as easy just to do on itself. So sometimes you need to have other supporting identification. So then well, you need a copy of your birth certificate. So it just keeps going back and back. So it's sometimes some of our successes are just helping them through that process to be able to access just as simple as getting identification, right? You know, it could be as, you know, some of the successes could be as simple as, you know, getting them into another program or making a connection with, you know, transitional housing. We obviously don't have those resources here. So, you know, there are a number of those, and I would say, you know, since we've taken over that program or delivering that service over the last four months or whatever, you know, I think we could probably easily identify 10 to 15 at this sort of stage of those residents that we've done. The other problem is that we lose track of, is success just a moment in time, or is there, you know, we lose track as to how that progress is going necessarily for that resident. Are they continuing down that path of maybe rehabilitation or transitional housing or whatever the case, or is there a relapse? Is there something else that's happened, right? Are we providing them an opportunity or transportation maybe to back to a home community where they might have some supports or services there? And is that where, we lose that contact because we're not case managers. We're not, we're not actively engaged in those sorts of activities past maybe the point of delivering or bringing them or driving them or transporting them back to their community. So as soon as they leave the vehicle, it's hard for us to say, yeah, this was a success, other than the fact that we might have helped them get to at least that first step, right? So I think maybe it's something we might be able to flesh out a little bit in our CAO report here in our homeless shelter. Reporting from our this information comes from our manager of the shelter through his director of corporate services. But it's, there definitely are those successes as it relates to that. And yeah, we probably could do a little better job.
Thank you.
Communicating those, right? So
just because, like I said, I know quite a lot of success has been noticed. And so just trying to get that information out so that people see that we're doing something. Because I mean, if there's one thing that we've learned this last couple of weeks coming on, is that not a lot of people have that information, and how can we make sure that it's available, it's accessible, and people don't have to look too far to get that information.
Sure. And the other thing is, it's I define success as moving down that road of transition, but another person may look at success as, well, no one has died because of exposure to the cold. Right. Or another success may be that they're accessing the service and that it's being utilized, and that they're sleeping overnight in a safe environment, that there hasn't been any significant negative events that have taken place in the shelter, that they're receiving some nutrition, and that they're receiving an opportunity to access services. So how you define success may be different from one person to another, but there are some of those, and you see, you might look at the stats and go, well, maybe that is successful in itself, that it's being accessed, it's being utilized, there's a demand, and it's being utilized. And so by virtue even of just having that service that's obviously servicing a need for someone, maybe that in itself is a success as well, right? So number of different perspectives as to how you measure it, but I think we could probably you have enough of the statistics to show the usage. Maybe we need to develop some sort of metrics to track connections and to track that progression down that path, right?
Councillor Hughes.
I just had a question under the economic development umbrella. You had just mentioned the industrial land market study. Do you have an approximate date on when that may be coming back across your desk, or?
Yeah, that was, I think we're still waiting on the revisions from the consultant based on our direction. So that was supposed to come in January. We sent it back with some requested changes. So I think we're set for, it's listed on the May committee of the whole currently. If it happens to come sooner than that, it'll likely come to a committee of the whole meeting. So the next possible date might be the April one if we get it in time. Otherwise, we're hoping to receive it by May. So.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Adams.
On the rural renewal stream piece, that'd be on the first page. First off, it's great to hear that it's expanding, that we're actually getting more communities to take advantage of this program. I'm kind of excited to see where that's going to go, to be honest. With this, so this Sunrise, that's up by Peace River, right?
It's north of us. It's north of us too. Yeah.
So I know our initial intent was mainly our neighbors with that uptake. Has the MD come back at all to make a change and want to be part of this, or no? They're still not. Okay.
Councillor Ochoa.
Given the rejection of our application for the Housing Accelerator Fund, are there alternative funding opportunities or strategies we're exploring right now, or what does that look like?
This was a federal grant. This Accelerator Fund was a federal, and we had a number of we had a number of potential projects that could have been funded under there. The rejection of this grant doesn't impact any of those because we always plan for funding sources through other mechanisms, whether it's reserves or other avenues. And this was a potential bonus if we did receive it or were successful. We actively are looking for all levels of grants. And we will submit if we're aware of it and we can find it, or we will submit, just about 100% of the time, or try to submit for funding as it relates to some of our programs or capital projects. So although this one may have been a rejection, we are actively monitoring and applying for grants and grant funding on a weekly basis for sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Adams. No, I was just asking if there was anything else, but.
Okay, I've got two more actually. Homeless shelter, back to that one. Just for clarification, what's the difference between registered and enrolled?
You know what? I don't know if I have a definition for you. I can find out for you though.
Sure, please. And then,
well,
sorry.
I think the 45 and 63 is just a combination. It's just a breakdown of the registered, right? So the registered is total, right? The 45 out of those 108, 45 of them were females, 63 were males.
Okay, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, and then I'll hop all the way down to the end under enforcement. I see on there we had 9 complaints, concerns listed for bylaw. How many of those call-ins were directed to RCMP, or were they all handled with just simply bylaw infractions, or?
I don't have an exact number for you. I will say that some of them may have been referred to the RCMP. So, and some of them may have been just dealt with internally by our own staff. So I couldn't tell you exactly how many would have gone to the RCMP or how many they would have assisted us on. I mean, bylaw complaints there's a number of different avenues of what it could be, anywhere from a property sort of bylaw complaint to an animal sort of complaint to I
just know a lot of the calls.
Party. Yeah. So
a lot of calls that even come in should be going to RCMP rather than bylaw, but
yeah, and
I'm just
sometimes
curious how that is still getting directed.
Yeah, so they're still directed through our fire chief is that point of contact with dispatch. And so depending on the nature of those calls, he will allocate them appropriately. So if they're more police related, then that may be the case. But and when they come in, so these calls traditionally are taken through our dispatch service or a contracted dispatch service. So if a resident was calling that number for a bylaw complaint, those dispatchers are also trained to recognize that, well, this might be actually a police matter, not necessarily a bylaw officer complaint that needs to wait till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning or something like that, right? So there is a diversion capability there at the point of first contact, so that if this is they think it's the resident thinks it's a bylaw complaint, but no, we should be dealing with it right now, it's a police matter, they have the ability to direct it to RCMP dispatch as well. So,
and one more comment, I guess, more than anything, is I'd like to say I like what you guys have come up with for the dog impound issues that we've had in the past that were taking up so much time. I think you guys have been creative in that, and kudos to you guys for what you're doing there. I like it. Thanks.
Any other questions for our CAO here? Councillor Choba.
Going back to the accelerator fund again, when we were rejected, were we given reasons? Like, was it something that we did, or was it just their selection process that we didn't make? Like, I'm trying to get that. Just want to be sure on what that looked like. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a lot of feedback. I saw some of the email correspondence. It was direct, like the submission was primarily held by our manager of economic development, who Jason had looked after the submission. So I was CC'd in some of that correspondence, and typically it's not so much something that we did wrong. It's more of a matter of there was a much more projects that were submitted than the funding that was available. Right. So it wasn't that we forgot to dot an I or sign a paper or something, or didn't provide information. It wasn't based on the quality necessarily of our our submission, but I would assume that they would have some sort of evaluation or metrics that they would utilize to evaluate all the different proposals and allocate funds based on maybe the strength of those proposals, the need, maybe some other statistical information relating to housing or housing demands and some of those, whatever the, so unfortunately, they don't give us a lot saying that, other than saying, hey, it was a good package that you submitted, or the projects weren't, this isn't a slight on what you had submitted, but it just didn't make it to the top of the pile, in compared to some of the others. So yeah, usually it's not a lot of feedback, just, sorry, but not sorry kind of thing. Yeah.
Alrighty, Councillor Adams,
Make a motion to accept as information.
any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That is carried. Next up, we have management task list. Any questions for our CAO on that? Councillor Moellem, I see you're getting ready to do a motion.
Pardon me?
You getting ready to do a motion?
No,
Okay.
I got just a comment or inquiry. A few months ago, we spoke about a youth advocacy committee. Many municipalities are using these as leadership opportunities to get youth interested in their communities and to also get a youth perspective on what and how we're doing. I want to see where we're at with forming this committee.
Yeah, so that committee actually was on, or the motion that was the creation of the committee and policy. So that was actually on this task list at one time, and it was actually completed. It was brought back for council to report. And at that time, we indicated, so the policy has been developed, the policy has been approved, the framework is established. What this is going to be is a project, one of the projects that our municipal intern is going to undertake. So we're waiting for that process for our municipal intern to essentially be identified, hired, and in place. This will be one of the projects that's assigned to that intern over the next 18 months. They'll be employed with us or working for us for the town, and this will be one of many, but this is one of the projects that's there. So it's essentially queued up, waiting for a staff resource to be tied to it, to start looking at formation of that committee and getting it up and running and seeing how it's going to interact with council. So it's coming, it's just on pause until we have a resource to allocate to it. Yeah.
Any other questions for our CAO on it? No, I will. Councillor Adams,
Make a motion to accept as information.
any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That is carried. Question period. Any questions?
I feel like
for
this
us?
has all been
I think we went through it all already. Oh, no, we didn't. Councillor Adams has one. Surprise.
You're on the hot seat today.
Apparently.
Okay, I noticed that there was a release from the Métis Nation of some plans for June 21st. Are we doing anything either in conjunction with them or with Storage or Treaty 8 or anything like that for June 21st? Have we been reached out to? Should we reach out to them?
We have, I don't believe we've been reached out to. You no, we have not received anything, no requests to participate, whether at an administration or council level yet. It's definitely something that we could do.
I'd like to see us move down that path. I think it's part of our truth and reconciliation piece that we're trying to expand on, and
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, what if you make a motion directing administration to reach out, blah, 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 then we will add it to the list and make it happen.
That's my motion.
Okay, Councillor Adams.
Reach out, blah, blah, blah.
The motion, do you have that, Ashley?
You know the intent there. Okay,
Is
perfect.
there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? That's carried. Is there any other questions for our CAO, Councillor Adams?
Sorry, my mic's turned off.
The one, with the change in weather and what we're dealing with here, I understand that puts some extraneous stresses on our staff and what we're doing in the community. But I know like our trail system, for example, jumps out at me. I've had a couple people reach out to me about it and I've walked on a piece of it. I'm just wondering, what are we doing to mitigate that risk of slip and falls? The icy surfaces, the pooling of water, the mud that's coming across, like, I don't know what the answer is, but.
Yeah, and I don't know if I necessarily have an answer for it. It's a tough, it's a big task. It's a large task with a limited department that's able to service that on a limited basis. Those guys that, the department that looks after, let's say the trail, I mean, we're talking about the pathways and walkways, not necessarily the roadways, but the pathways and walkways is kind of part of our facilities department, and that, essentially accesses or helps service or clear snow from those pathways. We don't salt the pathways necessarily, but you will see gravels, pea gravel spread throughout. So it's a difficult one for us to keep on top of, but I mean, and especially with the weather, the swings that we're seeing, it's melting and freezing. And so, our activities on one day may be wiped out by the next day's melting or freezing sort of thaw, right? So the only thing I could say is that we're trying our best to manage those public walkways and those public sidewalks as best we can. And that, we encourage people to take a little bit of extra time as they're walking and be aware of that those conditions may change, from a freezing to a dry or a wet puddle or whatever the case may be, especially during this sort of period of time. So
Just a curiosity on the service level piece of that, how often do we inspect these walkways? Like, do we have a town person go through and check?
I believe they're inspected on a weekly basis. I wouldn't necessarily want to commit that they're done on a daily basis. I was trying to say this department that looks after these also looks after all of our town facilities.
Right.
So they've got a number of, responsibilities and a limited number of people that are able to do that, right? So I think I would be safe to say that on a weekly basis, they're traveling or inspecting some of those or dealing with them on a complaint basis, driven sort of basis sometimes.
Okay. And then for concerns or complaints that a town member may have, they
Call
just-
into the town main office and
Main office?
it'll get to where it needs to go.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ready? Any other questions for our CAO? If not, I will move into our committee minutes. The first one up is the Tri-Council Health Committee. Your mic, Councilor Malone.
Who's playing with my mic over there? We had reports from Rural Health Professions Action Plan, Alberta Health Services, and the MLA, Scott Sinclair, stopped in as well. We were also joined by the Sarge First Nation. Sorry. Holly discussed the Let's Go Rural grant for our community. The program is to attract post-secondary students for healthcare related jobs. Tri-Council Health Commission will be applying for this grant and hopefully work with the school divisions within our region. And more details are coming. The Alberta Rural Health Week is coming up May 27th to 31st. This is a good opportunity to show appreciation for our local health care providers. Johan and Chris spoke from AHS. They said we are in a good predicament where we are usually running out of space, that we're actually running out of space for staff now. So we have a new physician starting in July or August, and they are currently interviewing for another nurse practitioner. The current clinic hours are weekdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If we are fully staffed, the clinic can look at staying open until 9 p.m. Monday to Friday. There is still construction going on and roofing is going to start this spring. And if you are looking for a family doctor, we currently have doctors and nurse practitioners accepting new patients. Cale Holmstrom and Darby Bannister with Emergency Medical Services also spoke about emergency medical staffing shortages in our region and all across the country, actually. They discussed some of the recruitment initiatives at the local colleges and within the High Prairie School Division. And then MLA Scott Sinclair also stopped by and he's looking to reach out to the province for help with funding EMS students. The need is big to keep the graduates here in town and our surrounding areas. Scott also discussed a potential pilot project for a region that seemed to get everyone around the table very excited, and more details will follow on that as well.
Ready?
Yep, just
teasers. Tourism.
Okay, so the Slave Lake Region Tourism Society, so we have been holding some monthly Beach Fest committee meetings right now on at the VIC, and we're continuing to the planning and execution of our event that will be upcoming this August 10th and 11th out at Devonshire Beach. We are currently seeking some sponsorship from local businesses for a variety of items to help assist us with the event. We have just completed a product asset inventory list of all tourism businesses based within the town area, the MD and the Sawridge First Nation. And we have now been able to share this with our Travel Alberta representatives. This list is a key component just to assist us in future grant applications and future development plans within the area. So this will just help us to kind of better understand the types of things that we need to be going after and any of the gaps that we're experiencing in the tourism market here. We will be going to the High Prairie Gun Show to promote Slave Lake Tourism Society, and we're looking into some other marketing opportunities as well, possibly including a large social media campaign with Curiosity. We are also putting materials in for the provincial hockey tournament and the Treaty 8 Cup as well. We have some upcoming grant submissions that we want to be working on with conjunction with the ANCA administration. We have been consulting with some other regional tourism boards and are continuing our work with the ANCA to explore the possibility of growing our regional boundaries to include that same North Central region. So work will continue to be ongoing in that. Our admin has been working on updating our online ATIS listings for local businesses and also adding new businesses to the site. ATIS listings is a component of the Travel Alberta website, and they are a critical thing to being seen and found within the website realm. So we want to continue to get those updated and encourage businesses to come see us if they have questions. We will also be hosting a cultural awareness workshop this coming fall 2024 in partnership with Indigenous Tourism Alberta. If we are successful in a grant application that we applied on, we would like to host that somewhere here in the region. It may not be in Slave Lake, but more details will follow.
Alrighty. Next up is CRC, and that is me. So our team members working in the Stronger Together program have been very busy. Tons of visitations. One of our team members is also attending a Native parenting course in Edmonton to gain a better understanding of culture and family dynamics. It has been about a year since the CRC moved into a space into the Legacy Center. Lots of growth, building relationships and more. The new location has made it much easier for our team to visit and connect with clients. So it's a much more functional space. Brighter Futures Next Steps program, lots of stuff being planned, virtual golfing, cooking, baking, babysitting courses. Overall, there's good use happening out of the center. At our Play and Learn class in February, there were 17 families with 23 children. That's a good turnout, very full. Overall, February was a very busy month with lots of programming happening out of the Slave Lake office. And that's it for CRC. And next up is MPC.
Okay, that's me again. So at our MPC meeting on March 4th, we approved a development permit to temporarily place one ATCO trailer for the Mobile Trades Lab at 1201 Main Street Southeast, which is the Northern Lakes College area. And that will be there until February 28th, 2026. And the second item, we approved a development permit application for discretionary use, permitting automotive vehicle sales, rentals and services, and wrecked vehicle sales and service at the Slave Lake Ford site on Main Street.
Perfect. I will just entertain a motion to accept the Councillor Choba.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept as information.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? We have State of the Lake, so I will start off with State of the Lake here. So Mayor Ward and Deputy Mayor Gramlich are currently in Calgary at a housing conference on behalf of the Lesser Slave Lake Regional Housing Authority. Tomorrow, I will be joining them in Edmonton for our Alberta Municipalities, Spring Conference. This is an excellent opportunity to meet with provincial ministers and lobby on behalf of the town of Slave Lake. We look forward to updating council and the community next week on how that went. And as most people are aware, we are doing engagement for our homeless shelter. There is a survey that is live until March 17th on engageslavelake.ca. So please be certain to head on over there and share your feedback. And is there any other updates? All right, Councillor Moellem.
It's not really an update, but I just want to say Ramadan Kareem. During this month of Ramadan, Muslims all around the world fast from dawn until sunset and make sure to keep away from food, drink, smoking, consumption of alcohol, and other physical needs. In the month of Ramadan, fasting isn't just about refraining from physical consumption of food and drinks, but also about keeping the mind and heart away from any indulgences. During Ramadan, people abstain from negative thoughts, behavior, anger, resentment, and the likes. Ramadan is the month of purity of heart and mind. So for those who observe this tradition, I wish you a safe and peaceful Ramadan.
Thank you, Councillor Moellem. Is there anything else for State of the Lake? Councillor Hughes.
I move that we go into closed session.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? Okay, we are now into closed. Thank you. Counselor Choba,
Make a motion to come out of closed session.
okay, motion's on the floor. All those in favor of that motion? Or any discussion on that motion first? All those in favor? We are out of closed and a motion to adjourn, please. Counselor Choba again.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion? We are adjourned. Thank you.